Tech apprenticeships work, but getting them started may feel like a lot of work. We're about to show you the key on how to do it and do it well. Welcome to another episode of Diversifying Your Technical Workforce, a technically learning series produced as a part of the Most Diverse Tech Hub initiative and supported by the City of Philadelphia's Department of Commerce. I'm Deborah Charmaloose, a creator, curator, and organizer who will be your host for this series, with the straightforward goal to give you specific tactics for diversifying your workforce. As a reminder, we at Technically are a news organization that serves a community of technologists and entrepreneurs. For years, our newsroom has worked on one of technology's longest standing challenges. How can more people have access to the fastest growing jobs in our economy? Over the last year, as a part of the City of Philadelphia's initiative called the Most Diverse Tech Hub, we produced a series of workshops focused on enhancing the tech futures of Black and Brown people by training employers with evolving best practices. This learning series you're watching now is a condensed and edited version of that workshop series. Each of our episodes will feature a different esteemed national expert. In this video, we're tackling the topic of microaggressions and their impact on mental health.
So what are microaggressions? I'm sure most of you have heard the term microaggressions in some way, shape, or form. And they really are the everyday verbal and nonverbal slight snubs or insults that people receive based on being a member of a marginalized community. So if you're in a community or you identify with a group that is not the majority or the group that holds the power in that space, then you're very likely to experience some form of microaggression. In many cases, these hidden messages may invalidate the group identity or experience of the people that the microaggression is being directed to. So different microaggressions may send slightly different messages, but the overarching message is really that you are different, that you're not like me, that you don't look, sound, or behave like I do, or it makes you some way inferior, and that makes me uncomfortable being around you. It could also be something along the lines of, you're different than how I expected you to be because of your race, or other type of identity, but we're focusing on. It is important to note that microaggressions can be experienced by members of any marginalized community or underrepresented community based on their identity. Again, if that identity doesn't align with who is the majority in that environment. Again, we're going to be focusing on racial microaggressions here and how they may manifest in the work. Just to give you a little bit of background, the term racial microaggressions was first coined in the 70s by Dr. Chester Pierce. The concept is also rooted in a theory that was developed by two other doctors called aversive racism. And aversive racism basically says that because a lot of white people are well-intentioned and they consciously believe and profess inequality, but they unconsciously act in racist ways, especially in ambiguous situations. So how that comes up for us as in the workplace as racial microaggressions is that people, are hesitant to believe that something that they've said or done has negatively impacted another person because they believe that they're a good person. Moving on to the classifications of racial microaggressions specifically, there are three classifications of racial microaggressions, which were first proposed in 2007 by Dr. Daryl Wing Sue. And they are micro assaults, micro invalidations, and micro insults. So this classification was really to separate the different types of microaggressions that you may experience. Some may be conscious, some may be unconscious, or some may be subtle, not as egregious. So obviously, if someone says something like, you know, you people don't know how to act, you know, that's different than, I can't think of right now, but I have a whole chart on it. So um, for example, like this page says, a micro assault would be something, very egregious, using the N word, for example. Micro invalidations and micro insults are more along the lines of not believing that you're good enough or smart enough or deserving enough for either that job, that salary, or something of that nature. Speaking specifically to racial microaggressions in the workplace, they can include a white employee assuming that a Black employee is of a lesser employment status. Say, for example, we've all seen things where someone has uh, walked into an interview and assumed that the Black woman was the receptionist and not knowing that they were actually the president of the company, you know, and not because they were sitting at the receptionist desk, just because they happen to be Black. Um, Also, asking your Black coworker if they can do things that are like get you a cup of coffee or make copies for you when none of that is part of their role. And you wouldn't ask a white colleague to do that, but you're asking your Black employee to do that. And the one that we always hear about, asking a Black woman or man actually, if you can touch their hair. Your hair is so exotic. Can I please touch it? Absolutely not. Um, if you specifically request a Black supervisor because you just feel, I'm sorry, a white supervisor because you feel like the Black supervisor isn't equipped to manage you, or you don't want to be managed by a Black person, you feel uncomfortable with it. Asking someone how they got their job, like how did you get hired for this? Like, how did you get to be a senior executive and I'm only this, how did you? And definitely someone using a term such as like you people or those people, like those are very much aggressive statements. Now we're going to talk about the impact of racial microaggressions. There are a number of factors that can increase the likelihood that a person may experience poor mental health. And two of these are definitely discrimination and exposure to trauma. So not only can microaggressions lead to poor mental health, they can also require significant cognitive and emotional resources to recover from them. So not only are you experiencing the anxiety, the depression, the burnout, the withdrawal, you're also having to give additional emotional and mental resources to try to overcome those concerns so that you can continue to go on with your life. So that's like a double whammy. Like you're causing these issues, and then now I have to go outside of my regular life to try to address these issues so I don't go all the way down. Additionally, the previously mentioned amplified gender-based racial microaggressions that Black women tend to face in the workplace can cause severe psychological and workplace consequences. I've seen this play out in multiple workplaces where it's a vicious cycle of, you're constantly receiving this discrimination and these racial microaggressions to the point where it impacts your mental health. And so your mental health being impacted makes you not be as motivated, makes you depressed, makes you, you know, antisocial. And then the conversation becomes, well, they're not right for this opportunity. They're not right for this promotion because they're all these things. And you weren't those things before. You're those things now because of the microaggressions you keep receiving. So it's a vicious cycle. Can be a vicious cycle. I also wanted to talk about how leaders should address microaggression. So first and foremost, they should have their own self-awareness and understanding of bias and where their biases are, and then lead by example in committing to not committing any microaggressions, but also informing staff that it's unacceptable behavior, that if it's done and it's brought to the offender, they should understand that it's unacceptable. Definitely provide training to employees on what microaggressions are. Excellent point, Robin. So what microaggressions are, and the consequences for them in the environment. On the front end, if you haven't already done so, do so. Develop an inclusive culture. So if someone does experience a microaggression, they can feel comfortable taking it to someone or letting them know this is what they've experienced and know that it's going to be addressed somehow. Definitely allow racially marginalized employees to have a space to discuss their experiences with you and with, in groups of themselves, so that you can get a better understanding of what specifically needs to be addressed in the workplace. And then definitely include in your policies and procedures, or I should say, remove from your policies and procedures things that could be, that could cause disparate treatment to Black or Brown employees, and hire more of them in your senior leadership positions.
That's another episode of Technically's Learning Series on diversifying your workforce. Thank you to our supporter, the City of Philadelphia's Department of Commerce. If you want to dive deeper, all of the most diverse Tech Hub reporting and learning, including full recording of the workshops, can be found on Technically's website. Consider joining our public Slack channel to stay up to date with latest reporting, subscribe to our newsletter, and follow us on social media to see our upcoming programming. Once again, I'm Deborah Sharma-Luce for Technically. See you next time.